When you read the beginning of Ecclesiastes, what you find in my mind is a person who's discovered great darkness in life. And when I read Ecclesiastes, I'm very upset because I'm looking for a way out, and I'm reminded of Sartre's book, at least the English title, which is No Exit. I'll just read a little bit to you and then ask ourselves, what do we do when this ennui finds its way into life, the sense that we're already in the tomb? When one's discovered the darkness, you're taken over by the darkness. I think the path of this author is, well, write a poem, write a story, don't avoid the darkness, face the darkness, live in the darkness, there's no light coming in. And then see what the author does with this, if I'm correct, throughout this text. So just a few lines. He calls himself son of David, king in Jerusalem. That's probably not true. We don't know when the book of Kohelet or Ecclesiastes was written. I believe it's very influenced by Greek thought. There's a sense, again, this is just Finley's interpretation. Nobody knows for sure. I've studied a lot, so I'm left with my own conclusions. Is as a text that in my mind is very much influenced by Greek culture. So therefore, this would have to be after the Hellenistic takeover of Judea in around 330 BCE. It has none of the hope of the book of Proverbs. It has none of the piercing literary darkness of the book of Job. It's rather a person who's looked out at life and has concluded there's not much here for us. This reminds me of the Sophists in the Greek tradition. Plato, as you may recall, was very much against the Sophists, who, while they were masters of rhetoric and could argue anything, they stood for nothing. And I think from Socrates, Plato's perspective, they actually did terrible damage to people in many ways that in some elite intellectual institutions where some professors actually influenced their students with a kind of a despair, with a sense that nothing matters, that there are no values, there is no morally better and worse. And then, this is my opinion, we wonder why so many young people are filled with despair, in my mind, because some of their greatest role models are people themselves that don't have lives filled with meaning, filled with purpose, and filled with some kind of moral hope. So whoever this author is, again, I think he's a Jew living in Jerusalem sometime after the Greek conquest. Greek literature has already made itself known in the area. He's writing in Hebrew. It does seem to be a transitional Hebrew. It's not ancient Hebrew. It's not Deuteronomic Hebrew, but it's definitely not yet Rabbinic Hebrew. So just a few lines here. He says, everything is futile. Now he uses the word hevel, hevel havalim, a futility of futility, vanity of vanity. It shouldn't be lost on anybody that the word hevel is actually in the book of Genesis, Abel. I'll talk about that in a few weeks as I go through my clearing up misunderstandings of biblical Hebrew. When we say Abel, the Hebrew word is hevel, which means emptiness, which means something like despair. Now, I'm going to question Adam and Eve's decision to name their child futility, vanity, despair, in the off chance that the child will actually live up to that and somehow get himself murdered by his brother. That's a topic for another time. So when the author says everything is hevel, in my mind, it's impossible that the author is not thinking about the Genesis story. So what does he mean by the Genesis story? We all get murdered. It doesn't matter how much good we do because we all die in the end. What murders all of us? Life murders all of us. It doesn't matter if you're favored by God or not favored by God. It doesn't matter what you accomplish, what you don't accomplish. The same end awaits every one of us. We are all hevel, the first person in the Bible to die. So when he says hevel havalim, everything is hevel, he says that's exactly right. We're all hevel. We're all Abel. We're all the person who is born with some such promise that God favors him. He's the first person to die in the Bible. It says, a generation comes, a generation goes, the earth endures forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, and then it rushes to its place. It rises again. It goes south, veers north. The wind goes round and around and round, and the wind returns. All rivers flow into the sea. The sea is not full. To the place where rivers flow, they flow there once more. He's looking out and he just sees everything repetitive and meaningless. While you're living your life, you think you're in the action, you think you're doing something. And he goes further in this chapter in the book and says, and everything I build, I'm leaving to somebody else. Who knows if they're not going to fritter away, waste it? Why do I build anything? My end is the same as a fool who does nothing. He says, I'm wealthy, I'm powerful, I've worked hard, I've built great things, I've achieved wisdom. I meet the exact same end as a person who fritters away their life doing nothing. He calls this a vexation of spirit, a torment of the soul and vexation of spirit. There's nothing new under the sun. Sometimes someone says, look, this is new. He says, it's not. It's already existed forever. He says, I applied my mind to seek and probe by wisdom all that happens. It's a sorry task that God has given us to be concerned with such things, meaning to try to understand what's happening. Then he says in verse 15, a twisted thing cannot be made straight, and that which is lacking cannot be numbered. It's an interesting thing. We try to count the things we have. You can't even imagine all the things you lack. You think about your life. Everything you've lacked in your life, you can't number it. And he's contemplating his life, in my mind, all his loss, everything that he's not had in his life. And sometimes I think for most of us, it's deep, enduring love and meaning and purpose. And in my sense, he's saying, I didn't have any of that. I can't even number the amount of loss I've suffered. This is from verse 15. He says, I applied my mind to know wisdom and madness and folly. I perceive that this too is a vexation of spirit. So try to understand the difference between them. There's a certain moment when you sit back and say, for all my learning, for everything that I've studied, we would say in our language, for all the Torah that I've mastered, so what? What has it done? I think many people say, for all the Torah that I've mastered, has it really made a difference to myself and other people? And this is a person at a very dark moment. I mean, one thing I can say, and I know Rabbi Manning agrees with me, and all of you who have something to teach, I know what I have taught has made a difference with people. People tell me, and they have no reason to tell me if it weren't true. So I know my learning's made a difference. But I've known a few professors who didn't have the opportunity to teach meaning to seeking people, but rather spent their life teaching students, and students come and go, and then asking themselves, what have I spent my life doing, if they haven't had those really incredible moments where a student has said, you've changed my life, you've reached into my soul. Now, there's one line at the very end that I want to share with you, and this was the line, I've oftentimes mentioned this, how I found my way into the Bible. I went to Hebrew school. It was a confirmation. I was a very good student. In case you haven't heard, Zev Yaroslavsky was my confirmation teacher, so I cared a lot about Soviet Jewry when I was in confirmation. I had a really outstanding education in my synagogue in Long Beach and my confirmation program in USY in Young Judea. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was so deeply immersed in existentialism that I was pretty much feeling, without having read Ecclesiastes, feeling that I was in the book of Ecclesiastes. I read a book called Revolutionary Suicide. I forget the author, maybe it was Huey Newton. And he wrote something like the following. He wrote, I read Hosea in the morning, or Amos in the morning, and I read Ecclesiastes at night. Meaning when he got up in the morning to fill himself with passion for social justice, fixing the world, he began with a Hebrew prophet. And at night, when it was dark, he tapped into the utter meaninglessness of it all, and he read Ecclesiastes. And I thought, well, if Huey Newton can read Ecclesiastes, then I can read Ecclesiastes. So I found my Bible, a Bible somehow, and I began reading it, and I hit chapter 1, verse 18. I'll read it to you in the Hebrew and then in the English. He says, Barov chokhmah rav ka'as. In much wisdom there is much anger or sorrow. V'yosif da'at yosif machov. And the more you know, the more pain you have. English says, one who increases knowledge increases suffering. I remember thinking that, and I just felt that verse had my name on it. That the more I studied, the more I read existentialism, the more I contemplated my life, the more I contemplated the world. Historically situate this was 1972, 1973. You know, the revolution ended with a whimper. Nothing really happened. Vietnam scarred the country terribly. There was a great sense of ennui at that time. I remember reading in 1969 when the war was winding down and the great revolutions of 1968 didn't pan out. And do you remember this where someone said, tomorrow has been canceled? You have to be of a certain age to remember that. And boy, did that capture the mood of 1969-70. For all of our effort, nothing has happened. We've lost a terrible war. People have been killed. Nothing came from it. There had been riots throughout the 1960s, and there's just a sense of great ennui. I actually hitchhiked up to Haight-Ashbury after high school to see what was up, and they had funeral processions that they were burying the movement, and it said, the revolution died, and we're just left with the drugs. And that was my experience of Haight-Ashbury, and I stayed up there for a week from one flop house to another. Finally came back to LA, and I said, well, wherever the truth is not in Haight-Ashbury in 1973. So I read this, and the fact that it said, as increases knowledge, so increases your sorrow. I thought to myself, truer words have not been written, and it's in the Bible. So when I thought of the Bible, I thought of these stories and laws, and I was in such a bad place that I couldn't imagine there was anything in the Bible for me other than I'm Jewish and I'm supposed to revere the text, and it had lost its meaning for me. I read this line here, then I read the first chapter of Ecclesiastes, and I thought to myself, how did they put this in the Bible? How did they pick allow such a forlorn book with such despair? How they allow it in the Bible? Who's this for? It's not religious. I mean, I just thought to myself, whatever I thought religion was, it wasn't this. And then and this is a very inchoate thought of a 17, 18-year-old kid who read this and was very moved, A, that the person wrote it and that they put it in the Bible. And I felt they put in the Bible for people like me, for people like me who were trapped in the darkness, in the silent house in the poem we read earlier. And in a way, what this was the book, as it was saying to me, we know you're there. We know you're there. We know you're looking for something. We're glad you landed on this page. Because we who put the Bible together, we have something for you. We hope you not only read this page, and not about the knowledge and the pain, but you read further. But more than anything, we have something for you, you young existentialists, too serious for your own good kids who need to know that the Bible actually sees you. So going back to my earlier point, and I'll develop this more tomorrow. So why is it that we can't see the light? Why is it that we can't see the truth? There's something in our lives where it's as if a death mask is put on us. We can only see darkness because the molten mask has been put on us, and we can't see outside of our own pain, and suddenly our own pain is all that we see. And as I went further in the book of Ecclesiastes, there are a few bright lights where it says, the darkness, the pain is not all that there is. There is darkness, there is pain, there is vexation of the spirit, there is deep wounding to the life of spirit. The book is saying we know it's there, but there's more to that. And now that we have your attention, we'd like to lead you through it. So there are other passages from Ecclesiastes that I'd like to offer to you. I think just 3 thoughts at the end. If you know some young person in existential despair, and I've counseled many of them, say, there's a book in the Bible written just for you. And they're going to say, where do I in the Bible have any connection? Right here, the book of Ecclesiastes. This book has your name on it. It's here. Whoever put the Bible together put this in it as well. Number one, it's a book to reflect your darkness, and it actually shows you a way out. Secondly is, as I said earlier, when you experience the meaningless of life, I think Camus said this, when a person experiences the meaning of life, you're impelled to write a manual for happiness. I'll say that again. When a person experiences the meaningless of life, you're impelled to write a manual for happiness. I think that is Camus. Someone can source check that quote for me. So as you go through the book, meaningless despair, and then he says, but I have a thought to offer you. So the book goes back and forth between despair, meaninglessness, some good advice, moments of happiness, and it goes round and around. It's as if he's just doing automatic writing. It's clearly a highly edited text, but it has the freshness of a person who's not trying to make a point one step at a time. He's actually circling around and around and around, darkness to light, sunset, sunset to sunrise, sunset to sunrise. It's also just in the Hebrew, and I think in a good English translation, it's just magnificent literature. So if you have not read the book of Ecclesiastes lately, we're supposed to read it every Sukkot. Actually, in traditional synagogues, they read the entire book of Ecclesiastes during Sukkot. I don't think I've ever been in one that did. We don't take time to really study it enough during Sukkot. So I want to offer this to you in whatever reading you're going to be doing this week. Pull out the book of Ecclesiastes, take a look at it, mark the passages that you like, and maybe the passages that I will be speaking about. I will be teaching. I will be touching on the passages that you yourself has indicated. So tomorrow morning, I want to go in my little 10 minutes of Torah a little bit more into why I like to say Egel Masecha, the molten calf, more than Egel Zahav, the golden calf, because if you look, I have many sources in front of me, the number of times the Bible says Masecha, especially in Psalms and the prophets, they clearly have a deep metaphor in mind. And since the text was written sometime in the 7th century, I know whoever wrote our story of the Egel Masecha, the molten calf, I'm profoundly convinced they were bringing in the meanings of the mask that we wear so that the light can't find us and that we can't see the light. So I'm going to make a case for that tomorrow morning. And then I want to go into the story of the Egel Masecha and answer ask a very basic question and try to address it. Something that really pains me. And for me, it has to do with what's going on in Israel. I mean, it is profoundly simple to find the truth. It's not difficult to understand what's happening there. And every single day I read journalists, newspapers, news outlets that do not want to admit what they see, admit what the facts are, but have an axe to grind against Israel, against the Jewish people. And there's something very, very perverse happening. So if one thing that the Ma'amad Har Sinai is, is an examination of human perversity, to not admit that something true is being shown to you, but our saying, but what I feel and I think is actually more important than the truth because there's something in me that has to get out. I'm curious to what that is. In general, why human beings insist on perverse thoughts, feelings, emotions, speech, and behavior. That's number one. Why it's happening in Israel, I'm very concerned about that. And as indicated a little bit earlier, what we can do about it with ourselves so we don't get caught up in this. And if we can fight it in ourselves, how we can actually help other people not get lost in this destructive perversity that denies the truth.